So hello everyone from hellos from ELC, Euro Central Asian Lesbian Community. As many of you know, we are conducting daily LLL sessions, which is lesbians who are locked down listening. And we also have special edition sessions, and this is one of them. And this session is actually dedicated to lesbian parents and families. And this session is being organized on the occasion of the International Family Equality Day that was on May 3rd. And from what I could find out is that it was celebrated in 62 countries this year and in 152 towns globally. And this is so remarkable. And thank you all for joining us for this session. For us who are in lesbian rainbow families, this is a very important topic. And even though we have come a long way in many of the European countries when it comes to equality of rainbow families, there's still many challenges in many of the countries, whether those challenges are formal and legal, or if those challenges are more related to the implementation of law and our everyday realities. And to discuss this topic, we have several, or I would say many, wonderful speakers. And I will introduce each of the speakers now, but just to give a little bit of an overview of how this session is supposed to look like. We will spend the first hour or so focusing on presentations from each of the speakers. And then we will have another half an hour for any questions and answers and discussions on some of the issues that were raised during the speeches of the introductory speeches. So without further ado, even though we have an hour and a half, I personally think that this is not enough to cover all the aspects that are relevant for this topic. But let's start. I haven't introduced myself. So my name is Dragana Todorovic. I am part of ELC. This topic is also personally very important to me because I live in a rainbow family. My partner and I have 2 boys, and actually my partner Milena, she's also one of the speakers today. And we live in Serbia, which doesn't have same-sex partnerships regulated in any way. And of course, children are also not regulated in any way. So we are facing numerous challenges, both us as a family, but also many of our friends across Serbia, but also the region. So personally, this is a very, very important topic for me. Now I will introduce the speakers. First, we have Maria von Känel from Switzerland. She's actually one of the founders and a board member of the International Family Equality Day. And having in mind that this session is organized in the framework of celebrating this day, we are really, really happy to have Maria here with us. And also, if I may say, Maria is also one of the founders of ELC and has been crucial, especially at the beginning of ELC in the first years of ELC. Then we have also Dettie Gould from the UK. Dettie is a proud lesbian co-parent. She's also a trade unionist. She's also a writer, and she's also a human rights defender. Then we have Joanna Śmiecińska, and I really hope I pronounced your surname correctly, having in mind that you are also a linguist and an activist and the president of Rainbow Family Foundation from Poznań in Poland. Great to have you with us, Joanna. Then we have, as I said, my love, my partner, Milena Markovic. She's also from Serbia. She's a lesbian activist. She's also a nurse. She's also a coordinator of the Rainbow Families Serbia, and she's a mother of 2 boys. And if I may say, Milena, as a nurse, she has been also heavily involved in the Corona Center on the front lines dealing with the most difficult patients. But maybe she will tell you also about this as well. Then we have Suzanne Brenner Jespersen from Denmark. She's the head of the secretariat of the LGBT plus Denmark. She has experience in conflict management, project management, and fundraising as well. Then we have Bonita Haberland-Hagman from Germany, who is engaged in Rainbow family issues for many decades now. And she is particularly focused on cross-generational issues and aspects of our communities. And we also have Anne-Marie Whelan from Ireland. She's a lawyer, and she's also a member of the legal strategy group of the LGBT Ireland. So as you can see, we have the most amazing speakers for this topic. And I will give the word to each of the speakers now, and I would ask the speakers to focus their contribution on three aspects. One is, what are the latest developments in your countries when it comes to this issue? It may be in your country, it may be also regionally, as I know some of you are also focusing on the regional level. Some of you are also focusing on the international level. So what could you tell us about the latest developments? Also trying to give your maybe personal reflection on how did you get involved in this kind of activism, and what are your personal goals, and what do you want to achieve as an activist working in this area or having this personal aspect of your life. And thirdly, if it is relevant for you, how and if the corona situation influenced your life, either personally or professionally. I know that it has influenced mine. And for example, Milena and I are now living apart because she works she was dealing with the corona patients. And I'm staying with the kids, which is a new experience. It was usually the case that I'm away and traveling and working, and she was spending more time with the kids, but now it's vice versa. So it has influenced our life personally and privately. So these are some of the aspects that I would like you to reflect on. So on the one hand, the latest developments. On the other hand, like, what is your kind of personal reflection on this? And also if the coronavirus situation has influenced your life privately or professionally, or someone else that you may know or are working with. Okay, so without the further ado, I would like to give the floor to Maria von Känel first. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you very much, Joanna. First of all, thank you to the European Lesbian Conference for organizing this Lesbian Genius talk. It's my pleasure. Then secondly, I want to thank all which are joining us, because I'm looking forward as well to share with you the knowledge from the people who are watching. And to your first question about the situation, the latest development in our countries. I'm living in Switzerland, and in Switzerland, we were successfully get legal the step adoption in the beginning January 2018. And before coming to the point, I want to thank as well the 100 back history of LGBTIQ activists which have done this possible to come at this point, as well thanks to the lesbian organization, which were the first organization which have published a lesbian documentation about lesbian and parenting, and that was in 2007. And after that, there were some groups, little groups, which created a safe spaces for parents, which, you know, before the last developments in the 20 years, a lot of LGBTIQ persons which identify themselves or found finally their sexual orientation, gender identity, they for them was clearly, if they have to choose between live as a lesbian or with the children, they decided against or pro. So there was, you know, like a lot of things happens before this step. And all my thinkings to all the lesbian mothers, but all parents which have lost their contact to the children because of the fact that they were unprotected on legal situation and were forced to quit this relationship to the children. So I will go now very personal, because the effect of the legal protection has affected myself. So I started 13 years back to be actively involved as an activist, because first I was mother. I was 22 years with my wife, or no, I'm now 20 years together with my wife, and with her, we had 2 children. They are now 13 and 11 years old. So myself, I was affected because it was already, our family came through original parenting. So there was no previous heterosexual relationship before. It was a planning through our relationship. When the step adoption in 2018 came into force, it took 2 years to go through all this step adoption process to be finally, and we were celebrating the last year that we finally have recognized our children. So here I want to point as well that even if the social or legal construction is there, it takes as well time to going through. And I have to confirm that there were discriminatory, which we have been facing, and not only in the way how the experts were dealing with us, it was already the fact that they named them they named themselves experts, but they have the lens of experts of a heteronorm family setting. And going through a step adoption process, which we as original parenting, it has causes a lot of issues within, but as well for our children, because, you know, how do you want to prepare your children and strengthen their resilience? Because they get involved through all this step adoption process. So that means that they did understand already with 11, 13 that their own states are discriminatory against themselves and as well as the family setting that they are. But the second one was very challenging. They did understand that the state has the force to say yes or no. I let by your own what that can trigger for feelings. So the second one, the personal goal. I don't know, thanks to the ILGA World State-sponsored homophobia report, we know that only 31 UN states recognize adoption and 28 step adoption. So that means, just take into account 176 UN states. So we have a long-term dedicated time where we can join all together and trying to create safe spaces. Because what I have learned in all my long-term situation as an activist, as a mother, fighting for equality for our children, is that there is a long term, and spaces are needed. We have to network together. We have to empower each other. We have to support each other. And I'm talking now from a country with a 100-year experience of 100 years defending LGBTI. Can you imagine in a country where the people who are living there in these states, they still don't have this kind of idea of identity, or the state is against them. They have anti-logo. So I'm looking forward to building up this wonderful parents community with you further. Then the coronavirus, how we were affected. Well, there is no area where we have not been affected, because can you imagine, the first is always depends, every rainbow families have other experience, because it depends of the class, depends of the education, depends of your income, depends of your relationship. You know, it can be that the corona has happened exactly where your relationship is in a very stressy situation, and then the homeschooling. People are more in thin apartments, so maybe you are very privileged, you have a garden, and you are happy within your partnership. So this point already vulnerable. Then the second part of the society, do you have access to this service, which is paid by the state, and you're fully free to enter them and being accepted as a rainbow families? Yes, we have some issues with the partnership. And how do we, when a state is against us, you know, like, do we make this step and are completely free about saying, you know, we are in the point of separation and so on. So, and the third point, on the point of view of association, the most enrichment access, which it's declared from the family as one of the most important, are the personal exchanges within the children, but as well as a parent. So for one day of the other, this has been cutting down. And now it's very challenging, because all this funding that our association has gotten is binding to contracts within this meeting. So what will happen in the end of year? Will we have to give back all this money? What that means for the future? Because the most of founders, they're linking usual for counseling, and so the only solution that we have now was to start to think about it. How can we develop further our online counseling? And that has been very successfully, thanks that we were able to provide email and video conference. But I see that in a very, very privileged position. We have association, we have funding, and we have the people volunteering, taking all these issues. That was.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I have a ton of questions and comments, but I will refrain myself for now. And I will give the floor to Dettie. So Dettie, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. And thank you to ELC for inviting me. And it's so wonderful to see all my ELC colleagues and other activists in this forum, because first of all, isn't it great to see a bunch of women? That's always good. So yeah, in terms of the UK's position, I mean, we may know the UK is quite privileged in terms of where its laws are, but not, when I say UK, I mean England, especially, because in terms of where we are with adoption, 2020 marks the 20 years since the Equality Act. We're protected in terms of parenting and sexual orientation and gender identity now, but in terms of parenting, I think, as Maria said, in terms of legal framework, in terms of where we are instead of state framework, my work, there's still, although that framework may be speaking about equality, maybe talking to us about how we are welcome as parents, how will we be assessed in adoption terms, for example, as equal, the the general feel about that depends on where you live. I live in London, for example, and I am not experiencing the level of discrimination in terms of my parenting situation. And I call it a situation because I'll explain why in a minute. But so, for example, I'm very privileged enough to share my beautiful 3 children with my co-parent and 2 other gay male co-parents. We have access to internet. We have access to schools online, and we are out at school. And so for us, London is a kind of a microcosm of what fabulous equality for LGBTQI parenting, lesbian parenting could look like. That is not the picture across the UK. And that's the unfortunate issue, even when you have legal framework. I'll leave it to my colleague across the water to explain what it's like over there. But in England, we are in a very privileged position. I'm on the birth certificate of my youngest child. That's amazing. But when we look at what the parenting situation is in terms of small villages outside of London, that is the level of prejudice, the level of discrimination, the level of inequality and access to services in those areas are nil. And it's difficult to understand unless you talk to parents within that living that are having that lived experience of what that might be like. It was interesting that Maria picked up on the fact that people might be separated or go and then in the middle of the coronavirus, what are you going to do about that? But even at the beginning of your parenting journey, if at the beginning of your parenting journey, legal framework was not great, and then halfway through your parenting journey, all of a sudden it becomes fabulous, how does that reflect on you as a person and as a lesbian? Because then you've got to work out that, oh, so things are looking great out here, but in your relationship and the way you're relating to your children, that's broken down. And then you have to think about how you're accessing psychological services or counselling services. All these other things then become almost pale into significance in terms of what the actual parenting challenges are. Because actually, as lesbians and as parents, parenting itself is not a challenge for us. It's not a challenge for us. We're parents. That can be done every day. And in terms of our resilience, in terms of whatever legal framework we have in whatever countries we are living in, and my background is African and Indian, and I know that my colleagues and friends who live in African nations and in Indian nations, they have a very, some of the frameworks there are very restrictive and homophobic and state-sponsored homophobic legislation, that even though that those frameworks are there, they are still being lesbian parents. There's nothing stops you from being a parent. No, it doesn't matter what laws are in force or what is there stopping you from doing. You are a parent. It's how you negotiate that relationship, either with your partner, your co-parent, and of course with your children. So in terms of the legal framework, it helps. It might help you gain confidence. It might help you gain the right to complain, the right to defend your rights as a parent. It might have all that. That is important, of course it is. But in terms of the psychological aspects and the social aspects and the emotional aspects of being a parent, it means nothing in that sense. You are a parent first and foremost. That's what your children don't look at you and go, oh, thank God for the Equality Act. No, they don't. They look at you and they ask for Weetabix, socks, trainers. They ask for time on the internet. They ask for, can I go and see my friends? That's what they ask. They don't ask about the legal framework. You still have to be a parent regardless of the legal framework. But I'm glad that in small stages where we are for our privileged centre in England, but I know that across Europe, and globally, that situation has to change. To bring that in line with more privileged countries is what we can only hope to do. But in terms of parenting, in terms of LGBTQI rights, it seems that this has to be established first before we can even look at parenting, unfortunately. It's not it's not the priority. It should be, because that's where the future activists come from, but it's not a priority. What becomes the priority is looking at LGBTQI rights. And it feels that we have to establish those centres first before we can look at parenting. I've touched on my personal kind of area around this, but I have a long history of activism in LGBTQI rights and human rights defending, and I have not always been a parent. My eldest child is, well, I've got a adopted a foster child who lives in Uganda at the moment, and they are 21. But my 3 children that I have that live with me part-time, my eldest is soon to be 15. I have one of soon to be 13, and my youngest daughter is going to be 8 on Monday. So that's where my personal situation is. My co-parent, we were in a relationship, we're not anymore. But we wouldn't, it's as if we wouldn't have this kind of co-parenting relationship with anybody else. We wouldn't choose to be parents with anybody else, because we've managed to keep our network really solid, to the point where, you know, in the summer, the children have 4 parents turning up at sports day, which, you know, is a benefits and challenges. But we enjoy a good network, so we're very lucky in that sense. So I'm gonna leave the personal aspect to one side, because it kind of has changed in the recent lockdown era that we're all experiencing, and touch on a couple of things. Obviously, my 7-year-old will be 8 on Monday. That will be in lockdown. She has a conflict of this. Her conflict is that it's great that she won't have to go to school, because then she won't have to do work on her birthday, which is good ethic. But in terms of not being able to see her friends properly, that's problematic. So she's upset about that, but we're all going to get a nice party, and we're going to go on to an app called House Party, and everyone's going to dress up like pirates always. That's going to be good. But for her. But in terms of the coronavirus, how it's affected our relationships and how it's affected us as parents, it's the element of society says you have to be productive. Society says you have to be doing something all the time. And what we've done with our family, we've decided that being bored and boredom, that's actually a call to action. It's a political act. If you can teach your children that being bored is a political act, you can nail it, because actually spend the time doing nothing. Boredom is not about a lack of things to do. Boredom is a lack of value in the things that you have to do. And in lockdown, there's just things that there are things that we can't do anymore. And once we had worked out with my children that actually it's fine to do nothing, then it was fine. It was okay. There's still some issues, you know, they want to go out. There's still some issues in terms of how we are able to travel between households. But in terms of how homeschooling has always been an issue, even without the coronavirus, because of course during the big holidays we have to do that. But now it's like one big long summer holidays, but without the school resources, because of course the schools, unless you're a key, I mean, I'm a key worker, but my children aren't in school. But we are lucky in the UK to have good online resources. I can't speak for countries that can't access that, and it must be very difficult. Keeping a teenager from going out is problematic. Keeping 2 teenagers from going out is very interesting. Can be a challenge, especially when one of them has asthma, which of course means that they should be staying in all the time. And then keeping, or keeping us all actively involved without the stresses and strains of listening to the news that is constantly telling you about how terrible the virus is, how the death toll. This is also difficult. And in terms of moving forward, I would love for there to be some sort of international global parenting network. However, I do feel that certainly for some of the countries from my origin especially, I just think that for them, they can't even think about anything else without establishing LGBTQI rights first. Because some of them, even if some of them haven't come from, as Maria said, you may have produced your children, had your children through sperm donor. You may have had your children through past heterosexual relationships. If that's the case, then what position are you in when your country doesn't recognize your sexual orientation or your gender identity? So those things, that, as I said at the beginning, that overarching legal and accepted framework needs to be in place first. I don't know that we can move forward enough for global parenting until that's sorted out. That's me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dettie. And I will now give the floor to the closest neighbor of UK, which is Ireland. So Anna-Marie, would you like to take the floor now?
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, so in terms of Ireland, I'm delighted to be on this call. I know I wasn't the first choice. It's very rare that I get asked to sub in for our CEO, Paula Fagan in LGBT Ireland, who is a fantastic advocate in this area and has done so much work to get us to where we are now. In terms of recent developments, we've had a big one in the past 2 weeks. On the 4th of May, particularly for lesbian parents, we finally had a piece of Irish legislation that will allow for 2 female names to go on a birth cert. So, you know, I know Dettie mentioned the fact that her name is on one of her child's birth certs and she knows the value of that. And finally, Irish same-sex female couples based in Ireland will get to appreciate that as well in time. And it's been a long time coming. I think 2015 in terms of historical activism and increasing that framework for LGBTQI rights generally, that was our big year. We don't have that 100 years of activism, particularly from a lesbian perspective, but in 2015, we finally achieved marriage equality. We finally got a legislative structure for gender recognition. And we also got what was called the Children and Family Relationships Act. And the idea behind that was to try and regulate scenarios that generated donor conceived children. And obviously there are a number of lesbian parents that would use fertility clinics and donor sperm in that way. And as of the 4th of May, same-sex female couples who have availed of that process, regardless of when it was, so, you know, we have pretty much 18 years worth of children that may be able to benefit from this, can apply to have the birth re-registered and both parents' names go onto the birth cert. So, I mean, that is massive. At the same time, it actually highlights the level of discrimination more solidly in terms of same-sex couples who can't access those provisions. So there's very, very strict criteria in terms of that. And, you know, it only children who are conceived in an Irish clinic or a clinic abroad that were permitted to perform those procedures, only using donor sperm that isn't a known donor. So there's no provision for known donors retrospectively, albeit that there is prospectively. Home insemination is not covered whatsoever. It's all clinic-centered legislation, and I think part of the reason for that is the state trying to legislate and regulate a clinic setting and not taking into account the fact that, you know, home insemination has been used quite a lot, particularly by same-sex female couples. It also doesn't take into account the fact that procedures around shared motherhood are available to people, and in including a provision that the donor cannot be known to the parents. Obviously that excludes any couple that's been through a reciprocal IVF process. And, you know, that the fact that your egg donor is also the intending parent and, you know, your partner automatically excludes couples from this legislation. So the legislation is gender neutral, which allows for same-sex couples to benefit from it. But at the same time, when you look closer at the processes, it does actually highlight discrimination on a bigger level, because what the state are basically saying is, we're happy to give you these legal protections that, you know, children should have and children need, but only if you meet this very, very strict criteria. And as many lesbian parents will know, we have so many choices open to us, and we put a lot of thought and effort into determining how to procreate and what methods that we want to use to conceive our children. And then to have the state to turn around and say that your decision is invalid, you know, you cannot obtain that legal protection, is quite impactful for a lot of couples. Now, from a personal perspective, you know, I consider myself quite lucky because I do fall within the provisions. I happen to be a lawyer by background. I have a 10-month-old little boy, and, you know, throughout the process, we had huge hopes that the legislation would have been passed prior to his birth, and then it wouldn't be an issue for us in terms of recognition. Unfortunately, there was delay after delay after delay. So even though we had the legislation in 2015, the relevant provisions were only passed last week, or only became effective last week. So we had to fight in that period. And in terms of activism generally, I came out when I was 19, immediately fell into activism through college, and I've been fairly geared up in identifying from a legal perspective the obvious discriminations that have existed in Ireland for quite a while. In terms of parenthood and the parenting rights, I was lucky to be invited to join a legal group, and I contribute to the AHR legal strategy group within LGBT Ireland. And I suppose that has been a massive release for me and a channel in terms of positive activism and trying to take these steps. And, you know, last week was historical. You know, it is the first time that we will see 2 female names on a birth cert for their child, a child born to the couple and conceived within that couple. And I think that is huge. And we do celebrate that, but we celebrate it as a first step, knowing that there's so much more steps to go in terms of recognising other pathways to parenthood. The legislation actually included a massive provision on surrogacy, and that was removed before it was passed. So we do have another massive piece of work to be done with a new assisted human reproduction bill that's in process at government level. And that's what we're kind of targeting at the moment in terms of our resourcing and trying to get movement and take those further steps forward. And I do appreciate it. It's a very Ireland central view, and that's what we are focused on at the moment. But I definitely take Dettie's point that, you know, parenting rights, they are very, very powerful. They're very needed for children, but they don't stand in isolation of individual rights as LGBTQI people. And I think when we did get marriage equality, it's funny that everybody thought that we were fully equal, that we had all the rights that we needed, that we were going to be free of discrimination, that we were going to be free to live our lives the way we wanted to. And then suddenly people discover, well, once you introduce a child into that equation, that goes out the window, completely out the window. So we're going to continue to be active in that respect, and as much as possible, yes, we would love to be involved. And I know Paula would be very much active globally and being involved in different fora to try and assist in progressing the wider conversation around LGBT rights. Now, when it comes to Corona, obviously we're all affected by it. I come to this from a very, very privileged position, and I'm very, very conscious of that for numerous reasons. You know, I'm here, I'm with my wife, I'm with my child, I can work remotely. We have a massive park that is literally at the end of our terrace. So we can get out and into the fresh air every day. We have access to technology. We can pick up the phone to any of our family and friends, and we have those social interactions, albeit that we're physically restricted. But, you know, I do not feel like I am impacted to a fraction of any person who may not have access to these things, or who may not be with the people that they love and have to be segregated, or even, you know, having a partner who's in the medical profession. You know, I can't comprehend that scenario and how to deal with that. But from a practical perspective around the legislation, we now have this right to get our child's birth re-registered. We can't access it because the courts aren't sitting. And it's not deemed a priority in terms of getting the processes in motion for that. So again, I suppose that highlights a wider issue, that even where we do have legal frameworks that should afford us equality or afford us protection, access to those frameworks is crucial. And the more barriers that there are in place to get there, it does really make it creates a useless impact of a piece of paper, you know. So while the framework is positive and it's great that it's there, if you cannot access it, it may as well not be there. So that's where we're at in Ireland. I suppose that's my personal perspective, and thank you so much to ELC for having me involved. I've enjoyed listening to the speakers. I've enjoyed listening to other speakers as well, and certainly picking up some notes to self in terms of information. It's great to hear the perspectives of other people in other jurisdictions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and for this legal framework. It was really interesting, and I was so surprised to hear about these restrictions in the legislation, which really don't make any sense. But maybe we can discuss it a little bit later. I would now like to give the floor to Suzanne from Denmark, also because Suzanne has to leave the session at 1. So now, Suzanne, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I think thank you for inviting me. And I think I sit here and feel humbly that I maybe shouldn't be here, because I feel so extremely privileged after hearing all your perspectives. Looking at lesbian motherhood from a Danish perspective is, I mean, personally, I have twins that are aged 14, and at the time they were conceived, it was illegal for a single mother or a lesbian person to get inseminated or to get any public health care from a doctor in order to become pregnant. So my kids are kind of conceived illegally. So every time I break, you know, I drive too fast and my kids say you shouldn't do that, I'm like, well, if I follow all the rules, you wouldn't have been born. So shut up. But it actually became legal in 2007. Which means that we are so privileged that when we actually, as a lesbian couple, conceive children together, you are automatically recognized as a co-mother. And then, of course, we have some, you know, bureaucratic things that are really annoying, because in all paperwork, in school registrations, etc., it still kind of says father and mother, and then you have to kind of, you know, check out the father. No, I'm the co-mother, but I mean, it's at that level for lesbian parents that you are actually automatically granted parenthood when your child is born, and that it has been like that since 2007. If they are conceived with donor semen, if you have an agreement and you are 3 parents, you are not recognized. So I mean, our battle right now is like battling for legal recognition of more than 2 parents. So what we're looking at is, could it be possible to get legal parenting rights for 3 parents or 4 parents? because that is the rainbow families that we see. And then we are right now looking into double donation. Double donation is not legal in Denmark if there's no medical grounds for it. So I would not be able to give my eggs to my partner and have her conceive a child with my egg and the donor's semen. So that's an obstacle. But in our family policies, we are right now much more looking into what are the legal terms for two male parents, because that is very difficult in a country like Denmark. And surrogacy is not allowed. They go abroad and use surrogacy, and now the children are stuck there and the parents are stuck here. Which is an obstacle in Corona time, but also when then the parents come home, then only one of the dads will be recognized and the other has to wait 2.5 years to become a legal co-parent, which also means that the rights to maternity leave, or what is it called? You get subsidies when you're on a leave, doesn't follow the child but follows the parent, and there has to be a mother in the equation in the Danish law. So we're trying to work to get that part of the legislation to reflect the kind of families that we represent in LBC Denmark. So in terms of that, I feel extremely privileged, but given our context, of course, because we have some of the rights already, we keep pushing for full equality, and I don't think we have that as it is right now. So I would say that from our perspective, these are some of the things that we work on in terms of parenting, not just for lesbian, but for the whole rainbow family for a spectrum. In terms of Corona, I also feel quite privileged. Denmark has had a quick shutdown, very effective, and we are now in a phase of reopening. My children will start school on Monday. I'm very pleased for that. After 2 months of having 2 teenagers in the house. But also the workplaces has opened. The rate of people who are really sick is very low. So in that terms of that, in all terms, actually, I sit here and feel quite privileged, and I actually would like to share it. So please, if I could share it, I would share it. Yeah. I think that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and I wish you could stay with us until the end of the session. But yeah, thank you very much for joining and for sharing this with us. And we are moving on to Germany now. So Bonita, please take the floor.
Yeah, hello. First off, I would like to thank everybody also for inviting me. I know that I also, like Anna-Maria, I was not the first choice. I'm actually here taking the place of Constanze Korner, who was basically kind of our leader in Germany for rainbow family rights, and a lot of the different things we've accomplished a lot of it came from her. But I have been fighting with her for the last 20 years. We've been working together in many different groups for the last 20 years. Starting in a bigger organization in Germany, but now we are in a new organization called Lesbian Femmes together, and I'm a board member there. Like Constanze, I am also a mother, and my wife and I have been together here. Our son is now 21 years old, and we were planning, took us about 3 years before we were actually able to have our son, but we've been doing a lot of planning and different things in Berlin and in Germany for more than 25 years. So let's see, in Berlin, it's a very similar situation, I would say, as when we were talking about London. I'm sorry, I don't see the name right there. In London, we're also very privileged that we have a different situation than other parts of Germany. It's a much more open alternative city than many places in Germany. But we are lucky that in Germany we do have the marriage now only since 2017, the marriage for all. But we did have registered partnerships since 2001, and one of the main issues for us here now is that we do have the marriage for all, but we do not have the situation like we heard in Ireland, where two married women together, if they have a child, they do not automatically both go on the birth certificate. You have to do a step-parent adoption in addition to that. And depending on which judge and where you live, it can be very simple or it can be very complicated. My wife and I, she was able to adopt our son, and it was very easy. The judge was basically like, why do you even have to do this? This is stupid, which it is, but we still had to do it. But I've heard other stories from many people here in Germany who, with the step-parent adoptions, have had to jump through lots of hoops that no heterosexual parents would have to do, but we have to do it. Yeah, so let's see, we have, with the Corona situation, we are also very privileged here. I'm a teacher, so I've been doing lots of homeschooling stuff. It's worse than it would be a lot easier to go to school, especially dealing with all the parents who are very stressed. But I've been very, very busy with homeschooling stuff, not for my son, obviously, who's going to the university. He's going online, and he's back at the Humboldt University in Berlin full-time, studying law and having no issues with it. For him, he says it's easier to do it at home than to actually have to go to the classes. He doesn't have to get up and get dressed. He lives about 5 minutes from us and has been visiting us quite often in the afternoons. My wife is also lucky that she's able to work at home, and she has teleconferences several times a day, but she is a high-risk person, and so we're very worried about that situation, but we stay at home a lot. But Berlin is also very lucky. We're allowed to go out and do stuff, just not near other people. Like there's parks, or you can go out to the forest and stuff like that. Yeah. For me.
Thank you so much, Bonita. I mean, I can definitely relate to all of these issues about homeschooling, as I'm with two boys. One of them is 10, another one is 12, and they're doing everything now online, and they also have classes over one of the Serbian TV stations. And I'm helping them with the homework. So I have to, renew all of my knowledge in maths, in physics, and in everything. And I'm so surprised how much I have forgotten. But that's also understandable, I think. I'm not that young anymore.
Yeah.
But let's move on. And actually, yes, since I mentioned our kids, I will now give the floor to Milena. She will give her own perspective as a parent and also as my partner from Serbia. So go ahead, Milena.
Hello, everyone. So Dragana can speak, I think, better about situation in Serbia than me. Actually, we don't have any rules here in our country. So we live in the same-sex partnership about 3.5 years, and we actually don't have problem, but the other people have a lot of problem with the kids and with other people. I speak a lot with other parents, LGBTI parents, and they're usually not out to other, and also not out to their families. And the families also don't know that they have children. So we have here in Serbia a very bad situation. So Dragana can tell a little bit later about that if she wants. From my own perspective, I think we really don't have problem. Only we have problem with my parents at this time. So I also don't have problem in clinical center of Vojvodina. I work there, basically at psychiatric clinic as a nurse. But now, since this COVID situation, I work in intensive care for COVID patients. And I have to come out with my story every day. So because everyone is speaking about families and everything, and also I have to speak about my family. I don't want to hide it. So, but as I can see, people have good reaction. We are not hiding us in our country. Anyway, the situation is very bad, but I'm happy to have also a Dragana by my side, because she's, I think, I don't know the word in English. Pokretač.
She's the initiator.
Yeah, of the whole situation. So if you can tell something more about the situation and everything in Serbia, it would be great.
Yeah, I mean, from the legal perspective, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the session. We in Serbia don't have any legal framework for same-sex families, same-sex partnerships, and of course, unfortunately, children as well. So, you know, we are completely legally invisible, but there are hundreds and thousands of rainbow families across Serbia. As Milena mentioned, many of them are hidden. We don't know about them because they are, especially when they have children, they are less likely to be out as a rainbow family, because they are also not only trying to protect in a way themselves, but also the entire family, and especially children. And this is the case because, you know, Serbia is still a very lesbophobic and homophobic country, as many of the countries in the Western Balkans. Still, the average of almost 70% of the population think that being gay or lesbian is a disease. And actually, when I was preparing for this session, I looked it up, and I've seen the latest data on this issue. For example, only 8% of the general population in Serbia support marriage equality and having children in rainbow families. So only 8%. And since, you know, rainbow families are living, especially lesbian families, are living in an environment, such a hostile environment, it's really difficult to even decide to have kids unless you have them from a previous relationship, heterosexual relationship, which is the case with Milena and myself. Milena has the two kids are actually coming from her previous relationship, her previous marriage, and I'm so lucky that she actually found out that she's a lesbian. So
finally.
And well, yeah, basically that's the situation in Serbia. And also something that, Milena, you are so modest, and you haven't mentioned it, that you have initiated Rainbow Families Serbia, which is the first organization in Serbia and only the second in the Western Balkans after Croatia that deals specifically with rainbow families. And well, it took, I mean, we in Serbia have many LGBTI organizations. Also, one organization is also a lesbian organization, but Rainbow Families was never a priority. It's always like something which happens only when other things are kind of in order, and this always gets left behind and falls through the cracks of other priorities. But then we were lucky to have Milena in Serbia to take up, to have the energy and courage and everything else to take up this issue forward in Serbia, which is really, really, really needed, especially now in the moment when Western Balkans countries are going through the EU accession processes, and within those processes, they also have to or should have some kind of legal regulation of same-sex families, same-sex partnerships, and having this lobbying and advocacy perspective of kids as well is really important at this particular moment in time for Serbia. But now let's move on to Poland. I will now give the floor to Joanna to give us the perspective of Poland, but also Poznań, and also from the perspective of her organization, which is Rainbow Family Foundation in Poznań. Go ahead, Joanna.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Dragana, for your nice introduction and excellent pronunciation of my last name. I'm impressed. The Polish legal situation is probably as unfortunate as the Serbian. We don't have any legal recognition of civil partnership, marriage, second parent adoption, or any other laws that in other countries seem normal and natural. And so the only solution that we now found useful and the only way to approach the progression of rainbow family rights in Poland is through addressing and looking for allies among local authorities, the ones that are still friendly in Poland, and also through looking for allies abroad. So our organization is a member of NELFA, International European Network of LGBTI Families, and this strengthens us. Hopefully now it will also be part of ELC, and yes, I hope the links will be even stronger. And yes, you might think that with no legal recognition, things can't go worse, but actually throughout the last year, they have in Poland. So they went from bad to worse because about 1/3 of Poland has been now has called itself LGBTI-free zone or zones. So zones have been created in Poland where the local authorities created some regulations saying that in this and that region, we do not accept the so-called LGBTI ideology. So you might imagine that this kind of bad propaganda is not helpful for the rainbow families who already are living in Poland and the ones who plan to become families in the future. So our organization, Rainbow Family Foundation, tries, as I said, to make as much change as possible with the little resources that we have. And we found that it's important to act on 3 areas. One is the strengthening the families themselves. So we organize integrational meetings. And the other one is to educate people around as much as we can. So despite the really adverse political situation with the conservative Polish Catholic government, we know that there are people, teachers, educators, practitioners, we can address who are more friendly, and we try to do this. And as for the more like political activities, we also try to get in touch with MPs, Polish parliament, but this is futile. And so actually, the less the really conservative Polish politicians know about rainbow families, the better, because if they know too much, they will come up with new laws that will curb even the little freedom that we still have. So for instance, there used to be no legal burden for single mothers, single women to get art and artificial insemination. And so they figured out that lesbians use this. So now every woman who wants to use artificial insemination needs to show up with a male. And this male is supposed to confirm that, that they'll be the father of the child. So still it doesn't stop lesbians from having kids this way too, right? They just produce fake partners. But that's sad, right? Because you start a living, you start your family from a lie. But I want to tell you a positive story of how even seemingly small steps can somehow mold the environment and improve things. So throughout the time that our organization started 2 years ago legally, but we acted before just without the legal recognition. And we organized events in the city hall in Poznań. We were allowed in it, so which was already a big success. One of the councillors there was first just part of the audience during a homophobia, so-called homophobia conference. Next year, he showed up as a panelist invited, and he admitted that he's Christian, rather conservative, but he's a good person. He has nothing against same-sex people, couples, if they sit at home and don't advertise their relationship, but kids, children, that's too much for him. And during this seminar, I played audio interviews with Rainbow Families from Poznań and around. And our kids were simply speaking their minds about families, about philosophy of life and everything else. So after this event, of course, and after he said what he thought, he was highly criticized by the activists who were the audience in this seminar. And fast forward 1 year, the same guy shows up on the local TV and he says, well, I met Rainbow Families and these people are really valuable and they deserve respect because all families are important if they love and support one another. Then he writes the same thing on his Facebook account and he opposes his other conservative friends. I mean, he's not completely conservative, he's center Christian or whatever. And then 1 year later, we have another seminar. He shows up there and he says, you know, before I had met you, I based my whole judgment on LGBTI issues and rainbow families on stereotypical footage of Polish TV. But now that I have met you, I listened to these kids, I met the actual people, I see the actual problems. I am there to help you. That's my duty to help you. And actually, we do get help locally. It's not highly advertised, so it's not that the local authorities will be so proud that they are doing this. No, they have to conceal it a little bit because otherwise they'll be bullied by the government-supported organizations like Ordo Juris. Probably some of you heard about it. I don't know. In the Western countries, you don't have this problem, but in the new democracies, they are really powerful, sponsored by Catholic sects. So really rich, really powerful, pushing anti-abortion laws and everything, anti-LGBTI laws and whatnot. So even the friendly local governments in Poznań and other cities in Poland are afraid of these people and can't be too open about being LGBTI friendly. But we do feel the support because when we apply for grants, we do get them. They are not big, they are small grants, but to us, it's a big thing. So thanks to this, we can offer psychological counseling, we can offer well-organized rainbow family meetings, and there's more and more events. So for instance, now in Poznań, we'll have a Family Equality Day, which means we are celebrating heterosexual families, basically, right? If you translate it in the language of the locals. But our foundation also submitted a proposal for a little grant, and we probably will get it. We still don't have the answer, but probably we'll get it. And our proposal said we want stories from kids from non-heterosexual or not standardized regular families. So We'll have a literary contest where the kids will write stories about rainbow families, but also single parent, patchwork families, whatever kind of family there is that's not standard will be also included in this contest. Of course, standard families will also be included because we don't want to be, discriminating against them, but yes. So I don't know how to relate to your questions because you said personal, but to me, my whole activism started because of personal reasons, because and that's why it's so powerful and so I'm so passionate about it, because if you do it for your kids and for kids of other people, and it gives you so much more kick than if you just do it because you need to earn money, right? And so that's why my linguistic urge lost with my activist urge, and I had to I decided to hang my research and do activism because it's the essence right now of what's going on in Poland and what's going on in our lives. So so I am the biological mother of a 20-year-old boy, and my partner now is pregnant with our second child, and the coronavirus will affect us because she's due in 1 week's time, and the Polish hospitals have strict coronavirus procedures, so I won't be allowed to assist her in the birth or after the birth. But I don't want to whine, everybody's in the same situation, so it's the smallest problem you can imagine. I mean, if everything goes fine, it's just we'll just go through it, so no problem here. And yes, we advocate, we meaning my family, because in our organization there are different types of families. There are reconstructed families like yours, meaning Dragana, sorry. There are planned families with anonymous donor fathers. We of course invite men to our organization, but so far no man has shown up, so it's actually lesbians with kids. And we also have co-parenting families, and our family is such a family. So we have our kids know the fathers, right? They are not called donors, they're called fathers, and they our son, because the other one still has no capability of knowing anyone, but yes, you know what I mean. So yeah, that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Now we have approximately 15 minutes for any questions, if there are any questions from the participants, from the audience, so to say. I see here also in the audience, we have some parents from Croatia whom Milena and I know. So if they also want to say something, that would be great. And if anyone wants to ask a question from the audience, you can raise your hand or just take the floor. You can see here next to your name that there's this symbol where you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And while we're waiting for any questions, I just had a comment on your speech, Joanna. I mean, Milena and I come from Serbia, and Serbia is very similar, I would say, to Poland, or at least more similar to Poland than to the rest of the European countries in the West. So we also see many of the similarities that you are also experiencing. Also having in mind that many countries in the Western Balkans are very conservative and very traditional. Also, when it comes to Serbia, very much influenced by Russia and everything that's going on in Russia, such as anti-propaganda laws and so on. But there's also this paradox that I'm frequently thinking about, like in the conservative countries, which are traditional, always focusing on family values, on as many people, as many babies being born, and so on. So this is one of the major focuses of their ideologies. On the one hand, there's this the paradox that I'm speaking about. On the one hand, they are pro-family, pro-kids, and so on. And then on the other hand, they're so against kids and so against rainbow families and so on. So I think that there is an opportunity, as you explained from your example in Poland, that maybe when we enter into a more closer dialogue with them in terms of with personal stories, with, you know, sharing our lives in the sense explaining how we live and that everything is fine, that, you know, that we can kind of get them to connect in their heads this ideology that they have and the realities that we live in. And another example from Serbia is that, as many of you know, we have a lesbian prime minister, and she's openly lesbian, and she lives in a same-sex partnership. So she has a partner. And recently, it was I think a year ago, her partner gave birth to a boy. So she's also now a co-parent. So that's the paradox. Like, she's the prime minister. She's in a position to do almost anything. She can introduce any kinds of laws. Like, if not for the sake of everyone else, then for the sake of her own life and her own life circumstances. And still, she is not doing that. So, you know, that's also a paradox. But there's also a paradox that exactly her being personally in this position was an interesting opening for Milena and her organization to get in touch with her. As I said, Milena is coordinating the Rainbow Families of Serbia, and many other, as I also mentioned, we have so many LGBT organizations in Serbia, more than 15, the last time I counted. And many of them have tried to approach the lesbian prime minister, you know, on various issues, and, you know, and most of the time, if not all of the time, those requests and letters and approaches have been met with, you know, just, you know, ignoring it, you know. And then Milena decided to write her an email saying, hey, I'm a mother like you are. I'm in this situation similar to yours, but why don't we meet up and discuss this? And for the first time, the prime minister decided to respond to Milena very, very like quickly. And ever since then, I think that was end of December last year, the two of them have been in touch. And they're almost like best friends now. I'm kidding, but yeah. So Milena is like, through this personal contact and through this theme that is probably something that the prime minister is more, feels more connected to, you know, as an experience. She is more open to sit down with Milena and exchange and talk and meet, and they talk almost every day, you know. So let's see what will come out of it. But I'm just, you know, linking this, like, on the one hand, we have the conservative prime minister who is a lesbian, and then we have all the things that we want to change. So, like, thinking about how we can navigate through these, you know, labyrinths of ideologies and conservatism and traditionalism in those countries which have a hard time accepting our realities and identities. Let me see if there anyone who wants to ask questions. No, not yet. But I do have a question for Maria. I've seen that for this year's International Family Equality Day, the focus topic was education. And this is such an important aspect for the topic that we talk about, not only when it comes to the content of the education, like what kinds of things are kids learning at school, but also in what is the environment that they go into when they go to school. And of course, this is a very important topic for myself as well, and probably for all of these countries which don't have high levels of acceptance, like from the general population. Milena and I constantly worry. So far, we haven't had any negative experiences from kids going to school and then experiencing different, you know, negative things from teachers or their peers. But we constantly worry, like, what will happen? Maybe they're just too young now to be, you know, in these kinds of situations. What will happen when they become teenagers? When, you know, kids, when they become teenagers, they at least in our societies, they tend to not accept anything which is different. So we are constantly worrying about this. That's from my experience. So focusing on education is really important for all of our families. So my question to you, Maria, is how do you see that? What did you what are your impressions of your Family Equality Day focusing on education? What kinds of reactions did you get? What kinds of outcomes?
Thank you, Dragana, for this question and for the opportunity to share our conclusions. At once, we were asking all the activists, but as well, we get in contact with governments with the question, which curriculum do you have implemented in the schools with spotlight family diversity? And you know, I was expecting somehow this conclusion, but not so less. And I will tell you afterwards why. We have got some feedback from the Netherlands, which sometimes they do include visualize, but as well with learning units. But almost all the countries' first initiative came almost from the LGBTIQ community. And if you look into and you break down how many governments do implement it in the official curriculum, so far I just count 4 countries. So now this is something which I really think that we need to challenge a little bit. You know what has made me think. You know, when we heard from the activists from Denmark, oh, I don't feel that I feel fit here in this space because I'm too privileged. And you know, my first reaction was, yes, you do. We need support. We need further implementation, because with the legal recognition, it doesn't stop. I mean, please be aware. We were how many times discriminated? You think from one day to the other is the social acceptance, you know, like increasing? No. And you know, I want to commit the states. Yes, just look into the account. One UN states 31. That means 16 countries. There are so many family ministers. We need to tackle them. We need to make sure that the money ends to the rainbow families. We need to make sure that those countries which are, you know, with the flag, yoo-hoo, we are diverse, we do inclusion. Yes, do that, but do that as well in the curriculum. Because you know what? In this curriculum, and now it's like the power of one of my beautiful words, intersectionality. If we put family diversity in the school curriculum, it's not only homophobia that we will tackle. It's not only hetero norm that we will tackle. We will tackle xenophobia. We will talk on a lot of issues. So this is a huge empowerment of all levels. And if somebody is talking about inclusivity as a government, please take your leadership and invest on it. Because if you look into the entry results of 31 countries, UN states, no, there is much more to do. And I want to meet all of you in person. I want to exchange with all of you more. And you know what? Joanna, she didn't tell you that in this moment, but they are organizing a Rainbow Families Conference. And I hope that the corona will make it. But let's meet us in person. Those countries, all of us. I'm living in Switzerland, but I need you. I need you with all my questions in my hand. I need to improve our situation.
Yes, if I may. Thank you very much, Maria. Yes, you're all invited to the seminar in Poznań. I don't know about the lockdown measures, but even if it doesn't happen in real physical space, it will happen on Zoom. So maybe it will make the participation even easier, right? So definitely it will happen. We don't know how. I'll keep you informed. Thanks.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Anna, for this invitation for the conference. And that this actually reminds me that this November, this year, there was supposed to be a one-day Rainbow Families event for Rainbow families from the Western Balkans and Turkey. However, it was postponed for spring next year. And where these things are a little bit more developed and a little bit more advanced, it's always great for the activists and people who are in these situations to see that it gets better, to see the role models, and also for you maybe coming from Western countries to the Western Balkans to meet with some of our state authorities. That's also important, because this personal contact with those decision makers is really important. And unfortunately, in our region, as I already mentioned, we don't have many families who want to be out and who want to use their position as an advocacy advantage. So from what I know in Serbia, there's only a few of them, and Milena and I are really one of the few who can really, go and speak to the decision makers openly. So this is just to say how much I agree with Maria, how this international connecting and networking is so important, exchanging from both countries that are a little bit more advanced than those who need a bit of help. And I hope that this session today was also one step in this direction. Of course, in the environment of Corona, we had to do it online, but also, this situation with the virus is also an opportunity for us to meet maybe more often in these online spaces. It's definitely cheaper and easier to meet up like this in a short period of time. And I really hope that these conversations will keep on happening, not just once in a while and not just on the occasion of the International Family Equality Day, which is of course very important, but also more frequently so that we can see what's going on in terms of legal measures and advancements, but also challenges in both the legal environment and also in our everyday realities and practices. So since I see that there are no questions from the audience, before I close the meeting, I just want to ask you speakers, do you want to add anything or say anything before we close the meeting? Go ahead, Maria, and then Dettie.
Yes, I just wanted to share with you that we just finalized the voting for the next theme for the International Family Equality Day, which we always celebrated the first Sunday. So on the 2nd May of 2021, we are inviting you to celebrate with us the motto, families being our authentic best, and push up the family diversity. Thank you.
Great. Sounds amazing. Thank you, Maria. And Dettie?
Yes, thank you, everybody. Anyway, it's been amazing to exchange. It's been great, and to reconnect with people I haven't seen for a while. But in terms of, I guess I'm bothered about who is in this conversation in terms of Europe, and who is in this conversation in terms of parenting, and who Maria made a point in her last presentation that I was lauding about we have to understand in terms of human rights and in LGBTQI rights where we are with acceptance of race, acceptance of how within LGBT communities, even the lesbian community, whatever that means to people, there is racism, there is xenophobia, and it's how we maneuver those conversations that then touch on everything, including parenting and education. And for me, maybe that's another session then, Dragana, for here. But I think, and invite me if that's true. But then I think that in terms of those conversations, as I said before, if we're hitting equality, then we have to make sure we hit all the equalities. We are intersectional. I can't leave my blackness or my lesbianism at the door. I can't choose to which parts of those come forward. They're all me. And so as a parent, I am a lesbian parent, I'm a Black lesbian parent, that's who I am. And I think that having those conversations needs to be an acknowledgement. There are strands of xenophobia even within our rainbow families.
Definitely, Dettie, I couldn't agree more. And this is definitely another session that we should do. And I think all of us at ELC would be really happy to organize this very soon. We will let you know, but thank you for this initiative. And I think we can leave with this, and we also made a plan to make another session. So I think that's also a great outcome of this session. And I want to thank every one of you who joined us as speakers, all the participants who were listening, both here in Zoom and over Facebook. Thank you again, and I hope we speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you, Dragana. Thank you, ELC, and to all panelists. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.